Loan? The bailiff didn't look up, just pointed at the clipboard like it was a gun. Amara Sinclair hesitated for half a second, then answered quietly, "You have it." She stepped forward, her boots silent on the linoleum floor of the Fairwood County Courthouse. No medals, no uniform, no entourage, just a plain charcoal gray blazer over a black blouse. She looked like someone who belonged on the back row of a DMV line, not in a courtroom. And that's exactly what they wanted her to look like. No one noticed the posture, the way her eyes scanned the exits, the way her left hand slightly grazed her waist, where a holster would have been if today were war. But this was not war. Not officially. "Take the seat," the bailiff barked, motioning to the side bench. She sat. No one offered her water. No one greeted her. She was listed on the docket simply as Witness B. Across the room sat Officer Travis Cole, decorated in his precinct, feared by half the town, and known in certain circles for making problems disappear before paperwork could catch up. He didn't look at her like a fellow citizen. He looked at her like clutter. His eyes did a slow sweep down her frame, then flicked away like she wasn't worth remembering. He'd been here too many times before. Too many defendants. Too many complaints. Today was just another he said, she said. Only this time, the she was trained to see beyond words. The case was minor on paper. A homeless veteran arrested for loitering outside a grocery store. But the man had bruises, a fractured wrist, and no resisting charge filed. Just Officer Cole's signature, a few checkboxes, and one statement: non-compliant, threatening, controlled with minimal force. That last phrase had shown up in 11 other reports over the past 2 years. And that's why she was here. Amara didn't speak, not yet. She had been told, observe only, don't engage unless instructed. But her presence alone unsettled Cole. Something about her face, familiar but unreadable. The hearing began. The judge barely glanced her way. The defense attorney didn't ask for her credentials. The prosecutor mispronounced her name. It was all going according to plan. Until she stood up, just briefly, to adjust her seat. That's all it took. Sit down. Cole's voice sliced through the air. Amara looked at him, not defiantly, just curiously. "I'm not interfering with proceedings, officer." He walked over, slow, deliberate. No one stopped him. The judge was distracted, flipping through notes. The court recorder had paused her typing. It was like the entire room, consciously or not, was giving him space. Then it happened. A swift motion. His boot connected with her shin, not hard enough to break, just enough to humiliate. A stay-in-your-place kind of kick. A you're-not-one-of-us kind of kick. Amara didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't even blink. She simply said, clear, calm, even, "That was a mistake." Cole smirked. "Don't posture like a soldier if you ain't one, lady." She reached into her blazer, slowly, deliberately, and placed a sealed folder on the witness bench. Top secret, U.S. DOJ Oversight Division, on-site operative authorization. Her name was on it, her ID number, her clearance level, and one more line at the bottom. In coordination with the Department of Defense, NAV Spec War. She finally looked him dead in the eyes. "Officer Cole, I was SEAL Team 14, deployment in Kabul, Ramadi, Marja, 10 years on ground, 4 years in internal investigations. You just assaulted a federal operative inside a courtroom, while under investigation." The air drained from the room. She stood up, straightened her sleeve, and whispered to no one in particular, "Now, let's proceed." The silence in the courtroom wasn't ordinary. It wasn't the respectful kind that falls when a judge enters. It was the kind that seeps in after something's gone horribly off script, and no one knows what to do next. Officer Travis Cole stood still. The smirk had vanished from his face like smoke caught in a crosswind. He hadn't expected her to speak. He definitely hadn't expected her to speak with authority. For a few seconds, all he could see was the gold seal on the folder. It shimmered under the fluorescent lights like something radioactive. Amara didn't move, didn't reach for the badge inside her coat. She let the folder sit on the bench like an explosive with the pin still in. The judge finally looked up, adjusting his glasses. "What is this?" His voice cracked. It wasn't a question. It was a plea. A desperate hope that maybe this wasn't what it looked like. Amara turned slightly, her voice measured but unwavering. "That, Your Honor, is a sealed order from the Department of Justice, authorizing my presence here as a federal operative embedded for covert evaluation of court conduct and law enforcement behavior involving veterans, particularly those of color." Dead silence. The defense attorney blinked twice, confused. The prosecutor dropped her pen. Even the court reporter froze, her fingers hovering just above the keys like the last note in a dying song. Cole's fists clenched at his sides. He wasn't sure whether to apologize, explain, or run. He chose none of them. Instead, he lunged forward. He reached for the folder. Some desperate primal instinct told him that if he could just grab it, tear it up, maybe it would all go away. Amara moved first, one sidestep, one turn. In a blink, his wrist was in her hand. A half-second later, his arm was twisted behind his back. She moved with no aggression, no haste, only precision. Like she had rehearsed this hundreds of times, because she had. Cole dropped to one knee, grimacing in pain. Gasps erupted. A juror stood up. The bailiff reached for his own weapon, but paused mid-motion when he saw the judge raise his hand. Amara didn't hold the lock. She released him after exactly 3 seconds. Not enough to injure, just enough to remind him of who he had just kicked. Cole stumbled back, red-faced, panting, humiliated. "You just assaulted a witness under federal protection," she said, turning her eyes now not just to him, but to the entire room. "You did it unprovoked, in front of a judge, and under a court oath. That folder isn't just paper, it's protocol. And what you just did," she paused, "you escalated yourself from internal review to direct disciplinary hearing with the Office of Federal Oversight." The judge looked pale. "Miss Sinclair, I had no idea." She turned to him. "No, Your Honor, and that's precisely why I'm here." The courtroom was dismissed early, not adjourned, just dismissed. Too many eyes, too much liability. The judge retreated into chambers. The attorneys followed, their faces tight with dread. Amara remained seated, legs crossed, folder untouched, no victory in her expression, no triumph. Just quiet, focused observation, exactly as she was trained. Cole lingered near the door, unsure if leaving would make him look guilty or staying would make him look weak. A deputy approached Amara timidly. "Ma'am, are you all right?" She looked at him calmly. "Physically? Yes. Structurally?" A pause. "We'll see." Outside the courthouse, a dusty wind blew across the parking lot. A flag hung limp on the pole, barely catching the breeze. Amara stood alone on the steps, watching as people filtered out. Some glanced her way, most didn't, but a few, just a few, held her gaze for a beat longer. They weren't looking at her like she was trouble anymore. They were looking at her like she was a mirror, reflecting something they hadn't wanted to see in themselves. Cole came out last. He didn't approach, just stood near the side of the steps, pretending to look at his phone, though his hand was shaking too much to type anything. Amara walked past him, stopped. "What you did in there wasn't a mistake," she said, not turning. "It was a habit you thought would be invisible. But I'm not here to fight you. I'm here to record you." He didn't reply. She took a breath. "And for the record, SEALs don't strike back, we neutralize." Back at the local DOJ field office, she sat alone in a glass-walled room, typing her report. The summary was short. Incident escalated by Officer Travis Cole at 10:42 a.m. Response. Minimum required force used to prevent tampering with federal evidence. Recommendation: immediate referral to Internal Review Board DOJ and Post-Commission. She attached one video clip from the small lens in her lapel pin. High definition, full audio, time-stamped. Then she logged out, sealed the drive, and walked out, leaving the building and the day behind her. 2 days after the courtroom incident, the Fairwood County Courthouse was under lockdown. Not the kind with sirens or police tape. This one was quieter, more surgical. A black SUV with U.S. government plates pulled into the parking structure at 6:13 a.m. By 7, 5 federal agents in plain clothes were stationed across the building, discreet but unmistakable to anyone trained to notice. By 7:45, the review had begun. Judge Wallace Thurman was used to power. He'd sat on that bench for 15 years and had a reputation for being efficient, which in small-town legal speak meant quick convictions, minimal delays, and rarely any pushback. So when Amara Sinclair returned, this time flanked by a Department of Justice oversight liaison and a Navy JAG officer, he knew this was no longer an incident. It was a disruption. One designed to probe deeper than anyone in this courthouse had ever been willing to dig. "Judge Thurman," the DOJ liaison began, "this isn't about a single officer. This is about patterns." He slid a printed dossier across the desk. 47. That was the number at the top of the first page. 47 cases involving veterans, primarily Black or Latino, filed and processed through this court in the past 5 years. Out of those, 92% had no legal representation. 67% involved charges later dropped due to procedural error. 0 had been referred to Veteran Services. Thurman shifted in his seat. "We've been overwhelmed," he muttered. Amara didn't blink. "No, sir. You've been complicit." In the police precinct across town, Officer Travis Cole sat in an unmarked room. No badge, no uniform, no belt, just a plain gray polo and a clipboard of administrative forms he hadn't filled out. Across from him sat an internal affairs investigator. Not local. Federal. Cole's face was pale, jaw tense. He'd been suspended, pending investigation, but what unnerved him more was what hadn't been said. No official charges, no public statement, no chance to spin the story. They weren't out to destroy him. They were going after everything around him. His silence wouldn't save anyone. And that, more than anything, was what terrified him. Back at the courthouse, clerks were being quietly pulled into conference rooms. The stenographer who froze when Amara was kicked, the bailiff who looked away, the assistant who processed Cole's use of force report without questioning the blank medical field. One by one, their roles were being recorded. The courtroom was no longer just a place of judgment, it had become evidence. Amara stood in an upstairs observation room overlooking the main hallway. From there, she could see the slow unraveling of a structure too arrogant to believe it could be touched. She wasn't smiling, she wasn't angry, she was simply waiting. She'd seen combat zones collapse. But this, a courthouse built on routine injustice, was different. Because this time, she didn't have to shoot. She just had to watch the rot surface. Mid-morning, the chief of Georgia's Judicial Conduct Board arrived. He didn't shake hands. He walked straight into the judge's chambers with a folder under his arm and a short, clipped greeting. "Let's not waste time pretending." 10 minutes later, Judge Thurman submitted a formal request for administrative leave. Unpaid. Indefinite. Outside, the whisper networks among attorneys, officers, and courthouse staff became a frenzy of darting eyes and half-closed doors. Everyone suddenly remembered things they had once ignored. By noon, Amara was called into a conference room by the Federal Review Team. "We're issuing a regional audit," the lead agent said. "Fairwood isn't alone, but it's the first to expose itself this publicly." Amara nodded. "It exposed itself because it thought I was just another name without a title. That's the problem." The agent looked at her carefully. "You planning to testify if this goes to federal court?" Amara looked out the window. The flag was moving today. "I won't speak for the sake of noise," she said, "but if they call my name, I'll make sure it echoes." Late afternoon, Cole was finally allowed to leave. No one spoke to him on his way out. No handshakes, no support, not even a glance from his captain. He stepped outside into the Georgia sun. Everything looked the same, but something had shifted, irreversibly. People on the sidewalk stepped aside, not out of fear, out of recognition. He was the man who kicked a federal operative in a courtroom and got put on his knees for it. He wasn't a threat anymore. He was a headline they forgot to print. Inside the courthouse, Amara gathered her things. She left the sealed folder on the desk of the new interim judge. It wasn't a threat. It was a reminder. Attached to the front was a handwritten note. "This court belongs to the people, not the patterns. A.S." As she exited through the east doors, her phone buzzed. One message. From a number with no name, only a Pentagon prefix. "Debrief at 600. You did exactly what we needed. Now let's do it in Savannah." She stared at the screen for a moment, then pocketed the phone. She wasn't done. This wasn't a mission. It was a campaign. And Fairwood County had only been her opening move. The walls of Fairwood Police Precinct had never felt this thin. That evening, the lights stayed on late. Phones rang without being answered. And the break room, normally filled with sarcasm, half-eaten donuts, and the ambient noise of television reruns, was silent. 3 patrol officers sat inside, avoiding each other's eyes. A kettle whistled on the counter, untouched. Outside, the parking lot shimmered with humidity, but nobody left early. They were waiting for a signal, for a shift in narrative, but none came. Sergeant Miles Carson, Cole's direct supervisor, paced inside his office. He had known something like this was coming. Not this exact incident, but something. Cole had been protected for too long. Not because anyone liked him, but because calling him out would mean looking at themselves. the shortcuts, the silence, the passive approvals. Now that protection was gone. And the question wasn't what happens to Cole, it was what happens to all of us. Across town, in a modest hotel room, paid for by the Department of Justice, Amara Sinclair sat with her boots off and a file in her lap. But she wasn't reading it. She was staring at a scar on her leg, small, jagged, the kind no one notices unless they know where to look. Fallujah, 2009. An alley. A boy no older than 14. A wire connected to nothing. A warning she ignored, and paid for in blood. She ran her fingers over it absently. The pain had long faded. The memory hadn't. And it wasn't because of the war. It was because that boy looked at her the same way Cole had. Not with hatred, with disbelief. Disbelief that someone like her could belong there. A soft knock at the door broke the silence. Amara opened it to find Agent Dana Brooks, DOJ liaison, holding 2 coffees. No cream, no sugar, just like hell, Dana said. Amara let out a tired laugh. You've been digging. Yup, turns out Cole's last 3 arrests of black veterans all followed the same MO. Late-night stops, loitering charges, no camera footage submitted. Amara took the coffee. And let me guess, the reports all use the phrase agitated and resistant. Dana sat down, nodding, word for word. There was a pause. Dana leaned back, watching Amara carefully. You know what everyone upstairs is asking? Amara raised an eyebrow. Whether I went off protocol? Dana shook her head. No. Whether we should have sent someone else, someone less visible. That word hung in the air. Visible, not qualified, not experienced, not decorated, visible. Amara's voice was quiet but razor sharp. They're asking the wrong question. Dana didn't flinch. I told them that. Another pause. You know what I saw in that courtroom? Dana said. Not just a cop kicking a woman. Not even a racist cop kicking a SEAL. I saw a system flinch. For the first time in years, it actually flinched. Back at the precinct, Officer Travis Cole sat alone at his desk. The lights were off. His badge was still in his locker, but somehow he felt naked. He scrolled through the internal memo from DOJ again. Red font, bold letters. Ongoing investigation into use of force violations. All patrol logs under federal review. He knew what that meant. They weren't just after him. They were counting bodies. Victims he thought no one remembered. Statements he thought would never resurface. Witnesses who had been too scared until now. At 2:34 a.m., Amara finished her final report for the day. It wasn't for the DOJ. It wasn't for the Pentagon. It was for herself. A quiet record of everything no one else would write down. The way the court clerk's hands trembled when asked for the docket. The 3-second delay from the bailiff after the kick. The hollow look in Judge Thurman's eyes when he realized his courtroom had become evidence. She closed her notebook, slipped it into the side pocket of her duffel, and stared at the ceiling, whispering one line, above the badge is the law. Below it is everything they don't want seen. The next morning, the sun rose over Fairwood like it always did, indifferent to the headlines, to the shifting power, to the silence that had settled like dust over the courthouse walls. But something had changed, not in the way stories change when they go viral. Not with protests or hashtags or the roaring voices of crowds. No, this change moved quietly, like water under a foundation, like rust inside metal. Amara Sinclair stood at the bus stop, duffel slung over one shoulder, not in uniform, not in armor, just herself. There would be no press conference, no victory lap, just the knowledge that her presence had exposed something deeper than misconduct. It had exposed pattern, a belief, carried behind badges, beneath robes within locked filing cabinets, that some people belonged and others should earn it by remaining silent. She never raised her voice, never threw a punch, and yet she'd shifted the balance in a place that hadn't known accountability in decades. A city employee sweeping the sidewalk nearby glanced at her, then looked again. Not out of curiosity, but out of recognition. He gave a nod, subtle, respectful. She nodded back. 2 strangers who understood something now hung in the air between them. It wasn't justice. That word was too clean, too quick. It was clarity, hard-earned, uneasy, permanent. Behind her inside the courthouse, Officer Travis Cole sat across from a disciplinary board assembled overnight by the Department of Justice. The questions came with surgical precision. Why did your body cam footage disappear on July 12, 2023? Why did you check minimal force used on 3 separate cases with fractured ribs documented in post-arrest exams? What justification did you have for kicking a seated witness inside a courtroom? He stuttered. He blamed training, fatigue, miscommunication. But it was too late, because the room didn't need answers. It already had the footage, the witnesses, the pattern. All it needed now was a decision. At 9:03 a.m., Amara's phone buzzed once. A message from the DOJ Oversight Division. Board ruling pending. You're cleared to leave. That was all she needed. No medals, no apologies, no press kits. She wasn't here for any of that. The bus arrived, old, loud, faded white with a cracked windshield. She stepped on, paid cash, sat near the back, and looked out the window one last time. Fairwood was still standing, but it would never forget her. Not because of what she did, but because of what she didn't do. She didn't retaliate, didn't yell, didn't fight like they expected. She made them look at themselves, and that was worse. On the seat beside her, a notepad lay open. Just one sentence written in sharp black ink. They expected me to break. I studied how not to. Far away in another county, a judge's gavel struck wood. Another courtroom, another case, another opportunity to get it wrong. But something had changed there too, because word had traveled, not through media, but through memory. There was a woman, someone whispered, who came in with nothing but her name and left with their silence.